I'm in an early JK with what I believe to be probably the most appropriate powertrain for a JK. Yes, there's more powerful. Yes, there's less costly. This is a 5.3 LT 10-speed. The 5.3 liter 10-speed has plenty of power. The 10-speed transmission, and by the way, I'm not sure if GM supports the 10-speed transmission with a 5.3 yet. They were coming with the 6 speeds early on, the base vehicles, then they started coming with the 8 speeds. But I think they kind of reserved the 10 speeds for the higher end vehicles like the Denalis and the Yukons and not the base truck. But that might change, so don't quote me on that. But the smaller displacement of the 5.3 LT along with the 10 speed, and then of course the high compression, and it's 11:1, which is pretty impressive when you consider this motor's 11:1 compression ratio and can run on regular gas. And the continuous variable valve timing and all the other technology allows this engine to perform right up there with the last generation larger cubic inch engines. In fact, we're going to be meeting a LS3 powered JK out at the trail. Now the LS3 obviously has more power. The LS3 is about 430 to 450 horsepower, where this LT 5.3 is about 350 to 360 horsepower. But it will surprise you, especially when you combine it with the 10-speed, how well this engine runs. Being a smaller cubic inch engine than the 6.2 or the 6.0 means it doesn't have that inherent torque that those engines have. But with the technology, it's pretty darn close. And I would venture to say that this engine performs right up there with a 5.7 VVT Hemi or a 6-liter LS. The advantage of this engine is it's readily available. GM has really been cranking them out. The relative cost is low compared to the other powertrains out there. Runs on regular gas. I think GM has this motor finally dialed in. This is an L83, and we're going to be doing L84s in the near future. And we'll talk about the L84 separately because it really is a different engine. We did some L83s back in the 2016 era with the 6-speed transmissions, and they all ran really good, but of course they had some of the same teething issues that the other LTs had. Although with the 6-speed, not as much. With the 6-speed transmission, the early 5.3s were pretty solid. However, they have made a lot of advances, especially going to the 8 and the 10 speed with a smaller cubic inch engine has woken it up. What that means is you can now run a 5.3 liter engine in your heavier JK with larger tires versus the 5.3 LS. 5.3 LS is a great motor, but when you put it in a heavy JK with large tires, you get it up to altitude, you're towing a trailer, that engine has its limitations. Now, don't get me wrong, it's far superior to the V6, and I would take a 5.3 LS in my personal vehicle. In fact, I had one in my personal vehicle for almost 10 years. It's a great engine. But if you're going to go to a heavier JK with 1-tons, 40s, armor, even 37s, I'd definitely go for the LT with the 10-speed. The 5.3 LT has advantages over the LS and the Hemi in several ways. 1, they're running higher compression. 2, they're running direct injection. 3, they're running continuous variable valve timing. And running a 10-speed transmission means we're running double the amount of gears that the old WA580 3.6 liter JKs have. This allows the 5.3 LT to operate at maximum efficiency. And what I noticed with these LT 10 speeds is the 6.2s will pretty much run in high gear all the time, where you'll see the 5.3 run in 8th, 9th, 10th, dropping down to 7th sometimes. But the shift is very non-dramatic. It's just a couple of hundred RPM, and it's trying to find its most efficient RPM. Don't forget, these engines also have active fuel management, so they can turn into a 4-cylinder. So economy-wise, we've been seeing really good numbers with a 5.3 LT. I had one guy in Washington tell me he was pushing over 20 miles to the gallon. He had a lighter JK with smaller tires, so don't expect to get that with 40s and 1-tons. This engine will downshift quite a bit if you're at 12,000 feet in Colorado pulling a trailer. It's just the nature of the beast. It's not going to handle it as well as a 6.2. But overall, as far as the drivability goes, economy, the fact you can run regular gas, performance, and don't sneeze at the 5.3 LT. The performance will surprise you. Now, if you're one of those guys that has to have top of the line, the biggest, the best, the muscle car performance, of course get the 6.2 LT. It doesn't really matter if you get the L86, the L87, the LT1, the LT2. They're all awesome engines. But if you're looking for something that's going to get the job done at a lower cost, take a hard look at the LT 5.3. And Motec has been putting the 10-speed in with the 5.3 for quite a while now. Again, I don't know if GM is supporting that combination, but it's a fabulous combination, and it really wakes up those small cubic inches. You saw what the 8-speed did for the Pentastar in the JL. Well, that's kind of what the 10-speed did for the 5.3 in the LT versus the old 6-speed. just makes the most sensible engine for a JK. It's readily available. It has enough power to get the job done. With a 10-speed transmission, drivability is about as perfect as you can get both on and off-road. It gives you that diversity, especially in low range, that you need. When you have 4 gears in a V6, 4 forward gears, you're pretty much limited. The engine may not stay in its preferred power band all the time. With 10 gears, continuous variable valve timing, and a direct injected engine, you're pretty much in the optimal power band all the time. So there's not a whole lot to say about the LS3. We are seeing the LS3 get a little long in the tooth. It's still a great engine. As I mentioned recently, GM has reconfigured the new LS3 crate motors. They've removed some of the components and raised the price. In my opinion, I don't think the LS3 is going to go out of production anytime soon, but it surprised me with the L96. It was available one week and the next week it was gone, and all the dealerships were surprised that GM just dropped it like that. The LS3 has really been out of production in this country since about 2015. I know that they continue to make it over in Australia. Holden did for a few more years, but most of the supply of the LS3s, or new LS3s, has been coming from GM Performance, and we're going to see what happens there, because the LT1 is making inroads into the performance guys, and now with the LT2 out, and of course the LT4, LT5, we're going to see what happens to the LS3. I hope GM keeps it in the catalog. It is a great engine. It's a very honest engine. When I say that, there's no technology like we have in the LTs. It doesn't have active fuel management. It doesn't have variable valve timing. It has about 10.7 to 1 compression, which ironically is less than this engine, but because of the technology of the LS3, 10.7 was considered a high compression ratio in its time. What the LS3 did was it offered a very simple, rugged, reliable engine, especially for performance applications. That's why it dominated all sorts of racing, off-road, on-road, track, because it was essentially the culmination of the small block Chevy from 1955. Yes, it was all aluminum construction. It had a cross-bolted 6-bolt main, skirted block. The LS3 really was the last of a generation. It was the last of the American muscle car V8 before we went to this high technology. It's an honest running engine, as I say. It has very good manners, it idles low, it has good top-end power, and economy can be pretty decent. It's not going to be as much as a direct injected LT, but it's not going to be that far off either. I grew up in the hot rod era, so if you're looking for more of that power delivery that the old muscle cars gave you with like a turbo 350, then the LS3 is for you. The 6-speed, the 6L80 with the LS3 is a great combination. It's strong, and it'll give you that same feeling that you had back in the day with your small block Chevy and a turbo 400 or even a 4L60 or 4L80. With the LTs, it's a different sensation. With this little 5.3, it's got a lot of bottom end torque, so you think you're driving a larger engine than you really are. When you get into the upper revs, of course the LS3 has got more horsepower and it's going to take it. The LS3, while it's not soft on the bottom, it's got good bottom end power. It doesn't produce its maximum torque until the higher revs, and that gives you that muscle car feeling. With this LT 5.3, it pulls you hard from the bottom. I want to say it's more like an electric motor, and it is. You guys know that electric motors have massive torque right off the line, and that's more what this 5.3 feels like. It's more of a linear power band. It's more of a linear power band that basically has torque right across the RPM range. Some guys say that the torque curve is flat as a dinner table. It's not quite, but it's pretty flat versus the V-shaped torque curve of the higher horsepower cammed engines. If you look at a 6.4 Hemi or a 480 horse LS3, yeah, they're putting out near 500 horsepower, but they're putting that horsepower up in the higher revs. The LT 6.2s are putting out massive torque at lower RPM. We put the LTs up against the non-direct injected engines, and we find that the LTs get their main advantage off the line. They might pull you a couple of car lengths, and then of course the horsepower comes in at that point. So take your pick. Right now we're in a transitional period. We're seeing these LTs mature. We're seeing GM refining them, getting better economy, getting better power with no sacrifice of drivability. We're seeing the LSs and the Hemis getting long in the tooth as far as cutting edge technology goes. Back in the day, the Gen 4, and you got to remember guys, if you look at the V8 engines that came out in the 50s, those were revolutionary. Yeah, we had V8s and V12s and even V16s before that, but they were very exclusive engines. When Ford and Chevrolet and Chrysler, of course, came out with their V8s in the 50s, that was a V8 for the masses that any man could afford, and that was a big deal. We were running 7.8, maybe 9 to 1 compression ratio. So the small block Chevy, while revolutionary in 1955, by 1985 it was getting pretty long in the tooth. When the Gen 3 came out with the aluminum construction and its technology. It was a big step up, but it was evolutionary. When the Gen 4 came out with variable valve timing and the higher gear transmission like the 6L80, that was a big step up. When the LT came out with the direct injection, continuous variable valve timing, high compression, high gear transmissions, it was another big step. So when you look at a Gen 4 LS3, it is not ancient technology. It's not a 1955 small block Chevy. It is the epitome of a 1955 small block Chevy. And if you're looking for that in your hot rod, or you want a Jeep that you can go out and hammer on the trails, the LS3 still makes an excellent engine. In fact, we're still doing a lot of the 6 liters, and I'm sorry that the 6 liter was discontinued. We just bought several of them to have an inventory because they're pretty much going to be obsolete here real soon. But I've said this before, if you want an engine as reliable as you can get a 6 liter or a 6.2 LS3. They're about as simple as you can get. Then that might be one advantage over an LT. The LTs are proving to be very reliable, but there are less parts and less technology in the LSs. I want to say the prices are lower, and they are right now, but I think that's going to change, at least with new engines. If you're okay with going with a used engine, you can still get great deals on low mileage and even high mileage engines. I get guys buying L96s with 100,000 miles on them, and that's barely breaking them in. I've seen them go 200,000 to 300,000 miles. So by no means is the LS dead. The LS still has a long way to go, especially for the budget build. And I know the engine choices are getting a little confusing, and I get the same question every week. Do I get an LT 5.3 or an LS 6.0? The overall performance is similar, even though they do it in very different ways. I would look at, what are you looking for? Are you looking for reliability? Are you looking for longevity? Are you looking for high technology? Are you looking for simplicity? And then base your decision off that. Now, in a couple of years, I think that question's going to be mute because the L96s are just not going to be available to us anymore. So we're going to hit the road with this LT 5.3 and an LS3, and we'll see you.